Welcome to the Health Stuff You Need to Know podcast. Information you need to thrive in our toxic modern world. I'm your host, Scott W. Kirkland. I hope you're ready because it is go time with the Wellness Whip. Yeah! Welcome to episode 9. This is a listener's digest podcast where I take 2 to 3 of my favorite podcasts or documentaries, listen to them, and then pick out the points that I think are the most important and relay them back to you. The idea is you get more useful information in a shorter amount of time because I know you're busy. I certainly am. The first episode I'm going to digest is actually a TV series. It is Morgan Spurlock. He's the guy behind Super Size Me. It's a movie where he goes and he eats McDonald's nothing but for 30 days and has horrible health consequences because of it. He's got a TV show called Inside Man, and this is episode 5 of season 4, and it's called The Truth About Toxins, and it's about toxins in your home. Very important subject. Morgan invites Nika Leiba from the Environmental Working Group into his home, and she is an expert on toxicity, and she's going to point out to see what kind of toxic products Morgan has lurking in his home. The first point made is that any chemical can be toxic, but it depends on a variety of things, whether it becomes poisonous or whether it's considered safe. A lot of factors come into play, like the potency of the particular chemical, the route that it came in, how old you are, what your health is like, whether you're male or female, how much of the chemical you're being exposed to. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when we're trying to understand just how much of an effect these chemicals will have on each of us individually. They start touring Morgan's house to look for trouble spots, and in the living room, the couch is the elephant in the room, it seems. The cushions of the couch are doused with flame retardant chemicals that are known to cause cancer and also being hormone disruptors. Now, these chemicals mess with your body's hormone system, and your hormones are extremely important to your health and well-being. So anything that messes with that is certainly not good for you. And you're exposed to them even just by being in the living room because these chemicals end up coming out in dust. And then, of course, dust swirls around the room. You breathe it in. The next thing they talk about is the carpet. And if it is a stain-resistant carpet, it has PCFs, which are chemicals that cause cancer, and they act as hormone disruptors again. So not good. They then move into the kitchen, and Nika makes the point that you should never microwave food in plastic containers because the plastic containers have phthalates in them. And these chemicals are known to cause birth defects and cause infertility issues with people. So do not microwave food in plastic containers. They then talk a bit about canned food. And the issue with them is that the cans are lined with a chemical called BPA, which is bisphenol A, and it is known to cause a host of problems, including cancer, hormone disruption again, seeing that a lot, obesity, and also diabetes, which is interesting. I didn't know that. So it is best to avoid eating foods that are canned. There are some cans out there that are BPA-free liners, but they're pretty rare, but you'll see it. You have to read the label to find them. Nika mentions the food dyes in some of the foods that Morgan has in his kitchen, and there is a cancer risk associated with those artificial food colorings. They go into Morgan's fridge and pull out some strawberries, and Nika mentions that the pesticides on the strawberries can be toxic to your brain, cause infertility issues, and a host of other health-related problems. So it is best to eat organic to minimize your exposure to that source of chemicals. They then look at some processed cheese Morgan has in the fridge, and she recommends that if you're going to consume processed foods, which you shouldn't, that you pick the ones that have the least amount of ingredients. The more ingredients there are, probably the worse it is, and I think that's pretty sound advice. They then take a look under Morgan's kitchen sink to look at the cleaning supplies they have in the house. Now, cleaning products are not required to have their ingredients listed, so you really don't know what's in them. So what I do with my family is that we don't buy any chemical-based cleaning supplies. We just use vinegar and baking soda and natural soap, and they work just fine. They then head into the bedroom and they look at some of the beauty products that Morgan's girlfriend has. And Nika makes the point that on the label, there is a list of ingredients, but it's very confusing because the word fragrance can mean it could be any one of or a combination of over 3,000 chemicals. So that is a very good reason not to use standard beauty care products. Most of them are crap. You definitely want to go for the natural ones, or you can even make them yourself. You are worth the extra time or the extra money that it may cost. They then go into Morgan's son's room, and in there of course, there's lots of toys, and the toys are made of plastic, and they can contain phthalates. There may be flame retardants sprayed on pajamas. And this is a really sad thing about the modern age. Our children are being heavily exposed to chemicals right from the get-go. Even before they're born, they're getting exposed to chemicals in the womb. And it seems that every new generation is getting more and more exposure than the last one had. So all the more reason to be really proactive with your health. At least that's what I think. Next thing that Morgan does is get a body burden test. And this is a test to see just how much of these chemicals are in his body. And this particular test tests for 28 different chemicals, and he had every single one of them, and some of them in alarmingly high amounts. The sad truth is that we all have these chemicals in our bodies right now. Morgan then asks the lady who did the test what he can do to minimize his exposure. She said to eat organic and eat fresh food. Great advice. She also recommends eliminating high-fat dairy because chemicals get concentrated. So the cows eat the grass is contaminated, it gets into the milk, and it gets into you. She also recommends avoiding cans. And that's not just food cans. It's also like beer cans and beverage containers because they are lined with BPA as well. You want to avoid any food that comes in plastic containers. You want to avoid using saran wrap, especially covering food in a microwave. Bad idea. Also, you do not want to use a plastic coffee maker. Make sure it's a glass one. Your laundry detergent should be the natural kind, or at least not have those chemical fragrances. She also recommends avoiding products that say that they are antimicrobial because they contain triclosan, which is another toxic chemical that you don't want in your body. She also recommends avoiding non-stick coating cookware because of the chemicals in there. Recommends using cast iron. I personally use stainless steel. She also recommends avoiding all fragrance products. So that'd be everything from perfumes to scented body care products to air fresheners, all that kind of stuff. It's not good for you. She recommends a carbon filter for your drinking water, and I certainly use one myself. She recommends avoiding rental cars and staying in hotels with wall-to-wall carpeting, and I believe that is because of the heavy use of flame retardants. She also recommends avoiding flying because when you fly in an airplane, you're getting another heavy dose of the flame retardants. She says that you could use a respirator when you're flying. Another wise practice is to be fully clothed when you're flying. That is, wear pants and a long sleeve shirts so that the flame retardants aren't actually on your skin and therefore absorbing into your bloodstream. Morgan then goes on a mission to detox his life. He goes through his apartment, gets rid of that flame retardant laden couch. He cleans up his diet, cleans up his body care products, cleans up his cleaning supplies. His goal is to reduce the chemical burden in his body and then do a retest to see if he's made any improvement. As a part of the show, he goes down to Boca Raton to the Natural Place, which is a community for people that have chemical sensitivities. And he speaks to a lady there that used to live a normal chemical-laden life until at one point she started to become sensitive. She got nauseous all the time, felt sick, and she was saying that essentially it's, our bodies can handle the toxicity for a while, but then some people, they hit a breaking point and then disease sets in. Morgan speculates that these people with chemical sensitivities might be canaries in the coal mine to act as a warning for the rest of us that something is seriously wrong. Morgan then hops on a plane and goes to visit Ken Cook, the head and founder of the Environmental Working Group, which has been working for the last 20 years to try and regulate chemicals. Now, Ken tells Morgan that the Toxic Substances Control Act, which was created in 1976, has been a complete failure because a deal was struck with the chemical companies that they could just grandfather in tens of thousands of chemicals, and they were supposed to do safety testing after the fact, which, of course, didn't really happen at all. There were over 82,000 chemicals in use in the United States, and only 200 have ever been tested for toxicity, which is a minuscule amount, and only 5 have ever actually been banned. The really important message here is that most people, they assume that if you can buy something in the store that it's been tested for safety, but the truth is it has not. You cannot trust the products in the store just because they're there. Your government has failed you, and it's important for you to be aware of that. Morgan then talks to a gentleman called Peter Sullivan, who is a detox guru, and he talks about the electronics and cell phone issue with human health. He gets Morgan to look up the legal disclaimer that's actually in his phone. And of course, it says that you're supposed to keep the phone at least 5 millimeters away from your body at all times. But of course, that's not really practical. Most men carry their cell phone in their pocket right next to their skin, and a lot of women carry it in their bra. And of course, when you're actually speaking on the phone, you're holding it right next to your head. These are all bad ideas, especially for heavy users. It's best to avoid using your cell phone very much. If you're going to use it, put it on speakerphone and have it sitting on a desk or table so you're not actually touching it. When I carry my phone around and I don't actually need to be in contact with the outside world, I'll have the cell phone in airplane mode so no radiation is being emitted from it. When I do need to be in contact and it's on, I try to keep it in a jacket pocket that's not in my pants pocket, not right against my skin, but in a loose jacket. So at least it's moving around a bit and not being stuck against my skin. It's also good to alternate where you keep it. So you don't want to just keep it in the same pocket day after day after day, because that is what's more likely to get you into trouble. It's better if you move it around different parts of your body. So even when you're talking on the phone, it's good to swap ear to ear during the call so you're not concentrating all that radiation into just one spot. And unfortunately, it's just not cell phones, it's also Wi-Fi. It's essentially the same type of radiation. So the farther away you are from your Wi-Fi router, the better. We have a Wi-Fi router in our home, and one of the things that we like to do is turn it off at night, so we're not being exposed to it when we aren't even using the thing. It's really simple. I have it plugged into a power bar, and I just switch it off. Super easy. After 10 days on Morgan's detox, he gets his body burden test done again to see if he had any beneficial results. And he did. He had some of the toxic chemicals in his body go down, but he also had some other ones go up, which is not surprising considering how much traveling he does, how much time he spends on airplanes and in rental cars and in hotel rooms. The main takeaways from this episode are that be aware that there are chemicals around us. We're exposed to them all of the time. Every single one of us has them in our bodies all of the time. And as time goes on, more and more chemicals are created. More and more toxicity is being added to the environment. So we have this steady uptick in the amount of toxicity we're exposed to. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that you can reduce the amount that you are exposed to by following the tips that were mentioned earlier in the podcast. I also recommend doing supplementation to help aid your body, give it the nutrients it needs to deal with these toxins, and really help your body detox to get these toxins out. That's why I really like green powders, because they have a large amount of nutrition. They're easy to take. Mix them in some water, mix them in your smoothie. I'm big on spirulina right now. I take it every day because it has great detox properties. You can get it at your local health food store. Now, sometimes I come across people that are overwhelmed by all these things in our environment, and they just kind of say, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just not going to bother trying at all. And I really don't agree with that sentiment. It's true. There's stuff out there that we can't really do much about, and we shouldn't worry about it. It's a waste of time. But the stuff that we can change and can do, I really think we should, because I believe that our bodies are our most valuable possession. The quality of our lives really is very much attached to the abilities and the health of our body. So it makes sense to me to try and keep your body in the best shape that it possibly can be. All right, that's going to wrap up my review of that particular episode. So just as a reminder, that was Episode 5, Season 4 of The Inside Man Show with Morgan Spurlock, and the title is The Truth About Toxins. So you can go to morganspurlock.com if you want to learn more about his work. All right, and now the next podcast I'm going to digest is an episode of Fat Burning Man with Abel James, and it's titled Dr. Andrew Miles, Why We Binge on Junk Food and What to Do About It. Now, I've certainly experienced the desire to binge on junk food, and I'm sure most people out there have, so let's get into it. Dr. Miles starts out with making the point that we really have the deck stacked against us these days. We have the world's top psychologists figuring out ways to manipulate us to eat more. We also have the world's top chemists working day in and day out to basically take crappy food and find ways to make it taste good, and also to have that food be able to bypass our body's natural satiety system. So we, instead of stopping eating when we're full, we just keep on eating more and more. Dr. Miles mentions that today, we're usually pretty busy. We don't have a lot of time to think about what we're eating. And so a lot of times the decisions that we make are not really conscious decisions. They're more of stuff that's coming through the subconscious, which is why these psychologists are able to manipulate us. And this advertising that we see is so pervasive and so dialed in. He mentions that the people that make them know what cartoons he was watching when he was a kid, so they can use that information to manipulate our subconscious. So I would say it is a good idea to avoid advertising when you can. Dr. Miles makes the point that a lot of our eating decisions are based on our environment around us and social cues from the peers, the people around us. Dr. Miles mentions a study, the bottomless soup study. This is where they took a bowl of soup, but they had a tube that kept refilling the bowl, and they were trying to see when people would actually stop eating. And it turns out that getting to the end of a bowl is really a cue to stop eating. And if it just keeps refilling, people eat huge amounts. And this kind of reminds me of being a child, and your parents want you to eat your meal. It's like, finish your plate, be a good boy. And I certainly have adopted that. But the issue today that Abel makes certainly is that the portion sizes are way, way higher than they used to be. So this is one of the big reasons why people overeat. Dr. Miles postulates that another reason why people overeat is that we're trying to fill an emotional hole, and we're lacking a sense of community. He says that, 80 years ago, people would go to work and then come home and go to a civic group, like a Lions Club meeting, and that when people eat in groups, they're getting the effects of a social experience, they tend to eat less. Because when you have a social interaction, your hormones change, oxytocin can go up, opiates can be released, and this can affect your hunger levels. They talk a bit about the ridiculousness of the food pyramid, saying you're supposed to eat so many helpings of this particular type of food, and that it's ridiculous because different people are going to have different activity levels. They live in different climates. So yeah, this one size fits all is not a useful paradigm. Dr. Miles mentions that he sees a lot of kids these days, snot running down their nose, lots of allergies, lots of chronic disease setting in at a young age, and that's very scary. He believes that part of that is eating out of season, so the food does not serve your immune system. Also eating too much sugar, which damages the immune system. And he says also damages the brain. They then talk a bit about the importance of the microbiome to your health, and that's certainly true, and lots of interesting science coming out on that. And he said that a lot of the current cultural assumptions about diets are based on false information, and that the old ways of eating made a lot more sense, like using digestive bitters or having unpasteurized sauerkraut when you're eating meat, etc. Has kind of been relegated to being a myth, but it's actually that old wisdom that is correct. Abel adds that Dr. Pepper used to be in the old days, it was made out of herbs and would act as a digestive bitter. It would actually help you digest like a fatty meal. But today, so many things have been perverted, and now they're the exact opposite. They don't help you at all. They hurt you. And Dr. Miles mentions that in Germany, the traditional way, if you ate a big fatty meal, you would follow it down with a shot of Jägermeister, which is a classic digestive bitters herbal drink to help aid digestion. And drinks were not served cold. He says that having a cold drink to wash something down doesn't make sense because your organs need to digest. That cold is going to slow down that process. And he also says that the pasteurization that we've seen also is an issue. Dr. Miles mentions a weight loss tip that when he wants to lose weight, he'll essentially just skip dinners and have some sauerkraut instead. He says it's good for the body and it makes it less of an uncomfortable experience. They then talk a bit about plant medicines and how it's not uncommon in Asia for pharmaceuticals and plant medicines to be used together because the plant medicines tend to be able to mitigate the harmful side effects of the pharmaceuticals. And then Dr. Miles says that in the case of certain types of cancer treatments, that when you combine contemporary treatment methods with traditional plant methods, you get a better result than if you were to try either one of them on their own. They also talk about the fact that when you take a plant and then isolate a certain chemical and synthesize it and make a drug, that's when the problems happen. The reductionist thinking, that we need to find the active ingredient and that everything else in the plant doesn't matter, they believe that that is incorrect and that those cofactors, there's so many different things in a plant that we don't really know about that are there to help mitigate the side effects. Dr. Miles makes the point that we are, in terms of DNA, 70% we share with plants. We're very connected to the plant world. He gives the example of someone, say, who has a fungal infection. You can get herbs from a plant that lives in a bog that has to deal with moisture and fungal infections. Drink the tea from that plant, and you're going to get those antifungal benefits. All right, that's going to wrap it up for that digest of that episode. And again, that was Dr. Andrew Miles on the Fat Burning Man podcast with host Abel James. The title of the episode is Why We Binge on Junk and What to Do About It. If you're interested in more of Dr. Wiles' work, you can go to enlightenweight.org. And he also has a new podcast called Botanical Biohacking, which is on the iTunes podcast directory. We have reached the end of this episode. I hope you have found a piece of information you can use to improve your life or the life of your loved ones with. If you feel that I've helped you in some way, I ask that you help me in return. Liking, rating, reviewing, sharing, and or subscribing all help me rise in the search engine rankings so I can reach and help even more people. Subscribing being the most important one. Thanks in advance. As always, I will continue to bring you the health stuff you need to know.